Hello and welcome back to my 2.5D RPG in Unity tutorial. Today we're sort of having a miscellaneous episode because we've got like a load of small things like death, pickpocketing and lockpicking. We've also got a few fixes, alterations mainly because they're not fixing the bug, they're just making stuff better, as it were, to make it more flexible to use. So first off, we can see that we have a container here. If we press I, we can't actually get the items from the container, we can just find a nearby assault rifle on it. But if we hold down Q to lockpick, and we just wait for a second, or till this number reaches 10, because it was just an arbitrary number that I decided, we can now access the items in the container. So we can take the water, antidote, and bread, and all that stuff. I'll take the ammo, and we are going to use the assault rifle. And next up, we can also pickpocket other players, but as you can see, since you can see me, he doesn't take kindly to being pickpocketed and will try to attack us. Since we're pickpocketing, but since he's run out of ammo, we can just wait for him to run out, and well, he'll eventually run out, but yeah. But we can also do this, we can kill him. And you can see he's now dead, and we can access his items. So let's steal all his water and bread. Something. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's go over how we did all this shit. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to go over how killing NPCs was done. So first off, we got dead as a boolean, just to mark out whether in the human stack controller whether we are dead or not. And this is used by this death check method, which checks if we are dead, as the name implies. So yeah. So basically, if the health is less than equal to 0 and dead equals false, then we perform all these different checks and disable components first. So first up, we get to see if this object that the human stack controller is attached to has a player controller. So if it's the player object or not. If it is the player object controller, then we say the player controller.dead is true. So the player's dead. So that'll basically, I think that was a new boolean. If I can just go to the player controller, I'll find it on this there. Basically, dead is also a boolean here, a public bool, which basically just says that we want to stop looking for input, so it'll stop deciding direction, face, movement, and stuff like that. So that's what that is, and I believe it's also used in the GUI here. So we just say you died as like a placeholder thing. And we also have a singleton in the player controller, so it's just public static player controller me. Equals this, just to have a reference to it for simplicities. But we don't use it on the def check because we need to work out whether this specific object has one, rather than just accessing the player controller generally. We also set the camera.transform.parent to null because it's currently a child object of the player, and that will become evident when we reach the end of the method. Why I've done that. Next up, we get the container off the NPC, or the object, like human that's died. We set can access container to true. Now, can access container is a new boolean that we have added to the container class. And that was basically just to define containers that we couldn't currently access because they were locked or they were the inventory of an NPC, so we'd have to pickpocket them. And that is used in the item monitor. So on like get nearest container, we're basically just checking for each of the containers. We have a new check. So if we can access the container, then that'll be a valid one. Otherwise, it just skips over it. So we can't access containers we don't have access to, like locked boxes or other players' or NPCs' inventories, without pickpocketing them or whatever. Sorry. All right. Next up, we get the weapon controller of the game object that the human stack controller is attached to, and we call this drop weapon method. If I can find the weapon controller is at the end. Now, I don't know if this was new or not, but I'll go over it again. Basically, it's just to drop the current weapon that's in the NPC's hands and put it in the world. So if my weapon is null, so my weapon is the weapon item class that is currently equipped. So if there's no weapon equipped, we don't do anything. But if there is We get the item script of the weapon item and the container that the weapon item is in. We say we don't want to hide the item anymore, so that's false. And then we add it to the container. So this will hopefully, when the NPC dies, it will add the weapon back into their inventory, so the player could just like go and pick it up out of that. But if it can't, so if it's still active and enabled, because items get deactivated when they're added to containers, then we just create the item in the world if the NPC didn't have enough room in their inventory or whatever. Then we just set my weapon and my weapon object to be null, because we don't need it anymore. Next up, we get we have an array of mono behaviors called my behaviors, and we fill this with this.gameObject.getComponents mono behavior. Basically, this is just a way of deactivating all the scripts that inherit from mono behavior on the game object, which is all of them. So it's basically just to stop fucking about with all the other scripts, which is quite a nice shortcut to do. But we do have a couple of conditions we want to check. So we go through each of the mono behaviors and we check if the player controller is null, so it'd be an NPC. If the mono behavior is not equal to the human stat controller, because we don't want to disable it because we're only halfway through the actual dying process, and the mono behavior is not equal to the container, that's the or the inventory of the NPC, because we don't want to disable that either because we'll need it in the future, because we still want to access it. We still want to allow the player to access it, like when they sorry, words failing. We still want the player to be able to loot the NPC. That's one. So that's why we need to keep that the same. That allows us to. So if it's not equal to this human stat controller or the container script, then it will disable the mono behavior. So update will no longer get called. Otherwise, if the player has been killed, then if the mono behavior is not equal to this or the player controller, then we disable it, because if the player controller, we want the player controller to keep running because we want to display the you are dead GUI, and we want to continue doing the whole dying process. All right, next up, we get the sprite renderer of the torso, and then all the sprite renderer in the children game objects. So that'll be like the head, arms, and legs. And we set the color to red to be bloody. It's like a visual effect to indicate that this particular NPC character has died. And then we go through all the sprite renderers that are children and do the same. Then we get all the collider 2Ds and just disable them so they're not blocking up the world. And then we rotate the character 90 degrees on the we don't rotate them 90 degrees, we rotate them to 0, 0, 90. So it looks like they've fallen over and died. And we disable, finally, since we've done all the death bit, we then disable them. It would disable this script because we're done with it now. We don't need any more stats because you're dead. Finally, we set dead to true, which should probably be here, actually. But I suppose that doesn't really matter. But oh well, maybe you could raise the dead or something. But yeah, that was dying. Is there anything else? No, I don't believe so. Right, so we also have a quick check for if the player is dead within the actions that the NPCs can perform. So this is where the singleton is used. I said I explained on the player controller. Basically, if player controller.me.dead is true, then we don't do anything. So that should probably be up here actually. So yeah, so basically, if the player is dead, we don't need to perform this action because they've died and they'll need to reload as soon as we implement loading, which will be probably next year at the rate I go, at 1 a week, but whatever. So yeah, that's just in all the actions. And next, we also have implemented, where is it? NPC. Basically, I've got, I've rewritten how NPCs detect the player. So one thing is that we now have this enum called direction we are facing. which basically just stores all the directions that the NPC can face, because we have 8 directional movement. And this is controlled by decide direction to face. Basically what we've done is, with all the calculations of what direction we're facing and changing the sprite, we're also just storing information on, we just changed the direction we are facing. We store it there so we can reference it on, when we're trying to detect something, to work out whether we're actually facing that object or not. So basically, say if we are setting us to face down, we at the same time we'd also set direction facing to be direction we are facing down, and likewise for all the other directions, so up right, down right, whatever. Yeah, this was basically just so we didn't have to perform another method call to do it. We could just reference it from the NPC class. And I believe I've also made all of these public, or I'm not sure. I think I did, but yeah. In case I didn't do this before, all these are now public, because I think some of them were private. But I've forgotten which, because I should have written them down, but I didn't. Yeah. So next up, we have this new Mpc Target Detect, which has been added to all the NPC classes. Basically, this is just pretty much identical code to what we had in the, I believe it was the Hunt player action, where we'd raycast the player. But we don't actually need this anymore, so I'll just delete that now. Yeah. Basically, this is just a new script which has methods for checking whether an NPC is facing a target. So this is basically just checking the current direction we're facing via the enum I just described, and then it checks that against the position of the NPC relative to the target that is passed in, and likewise also has a boolean to check whether we are near to the target. And finally, we can also cast a raycast from the torso of the NPC to the target. My reasoning for doing this was it had basically 2 things. One, we can just pass in any game object, so it doesn't exclusively have to be the player, which is always good, because then we could have, I don't know, the AI fighting each other or something. And the second is it's more flexible, because because we don't have to have repeated instances. Say if we didn't have this, we might have to do keep having methods in the what am I trying to say? Sorry, copies of the same method over and over in different actions, where we'd need to work out whether the NPC can detect the player. But by having it in one script, we are only doing it max once per frame, and then we can have multiple places referencing this script. So that's good, save performance, and makes it a lot easier to use, and makes it more flexible. So that's always fun. One issue I did note was that let's get rid of that. Sometimes there's a bit of a problem detecting targets because it'll get stuck on the colliders for the legs or head of the NPC that is actually trying to do the detection, so where the raycast starts, and that could be a problem. So I'm going to try and work out a way to get around that, but that will be in a future episode. So for now, this also provides the best results, but it has problems detecting targets that are directly above or directly below because of leg and head colliders because of the leg and head colliders. Sorry, tripping over my words. So yeah, that's it. So it's pretty much the same as it was before, except instead of checking for the tags being the player components, we're just checking whether the hit.collider.gameObject is either the target game object that we've passed in, or if the hit.collider.gameObject is a child, or if the parent game object is the target that we wanted to look for. So yeah. And also we have a sort of combined method, which basically is saying, can we detect the target, which calls these methods in, I think it's the order of how long it takes to do the calculation from least expensive to most expensive. So say we check we're near to target because just checking a distance shouldn't be that expensive. So we just do this first, and if it's false, so if we are out of range of the target, then we don't need to call any of these other methods. So we'll save performance, hopefully. And yeah, that was what I was going for, basically, with the ordering, rather than having it in like with an and with like and if facing, yeah. So that's why it's 3 separate if statements rather than just one with a load of ands. And yeah, that was Mpc Target Detect. So the main place that this Mpc Target Detect is used is one in the NPC, where we just have a public reference to it, and that is got in awake, so that's just initialized there. And then we use it in the action hunt player. So basically, what we're doing is we're using my Mpc Target Detect, or NTD, because I just use like initials to name my things. Can I detect target and pathfinding.me.player? I should probably get a better reference than that because I'm not going to keep it the player reference of pathfinding forever. But yeah, basically we've got here, and we've changed it so instead of using that raycasting method that we originally had in action hunt player, we now just call weapon control here and fire weapon if the ray has hit the player. So it's simple. We've also got another new thing from in Action Hunt Player, which is basically if we don't have a weapon equipped, the NPC will try and do it itself. So basically, if the WC, or the weapon controller, we try and get a weapon controller off the player, and if WC.myweapon is null, then actually I should probably have that check here. So sorry, if WC.myweapon equals null, then we don't want to do anything, else we want to fire the weapon. And we'll need to have a, we might be able to make this more generic for like any target, but for now we'll just stick with the player. But back to where we were going. So if we don't have a weapon currently equipped, we get the container off the off this current object, and we go through all the items in the container. And if we can get a weapon item script off that item, or we try to, sorry, and if that item is null, then we use the item. So this basically calls a use item method, which is a new method I've added to the container. Where is it? Sorry. It literally just takes an item and has the same functionality as the use item that we had linked to the button here. That is use item, yes, except that we're not calling it from the array, we're just calling it from the item we passed in. But this is basically just so NPCs could use the items as well as the player. So yeah. Okay, and then that will equip the weapon, and then we just return, because since this will have modified the list of items in the container, it'll throw up an error. So we just need to return, and that will stop this perform action getting called on this update call. And on the next one, it'll go through all these. It'll see that weapon is wc.myweapon is not null. So it will then just go past all this and go on to distance from player and call all the updatey stuff, and that'll be all good. Right. Okay, so first up, I just wanted to point out that I've made all the human torso, human legs, human head, or human arms in human public. I don't think that was the same beforehand, but just in case it wasn't, it's been pointed out now because we use it for finding a position to raycast in the Mpc Target Detect. And for the guy who didn't like my yawn in like 2 episodes ago, I hope you enjoyed the burp. Okay. So finally, we got actually onto the lockpicking. Now, it's not like a mini game like a Fallout has, you know, with the bobby pin and whatnot. It's literally just you're holding the button and it unlocks. Yeah, I mean, if people were desperate for like a mini game like that, I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to work out. But for now, we've just got locked containers. I'll wait for the train to go by. So yeah. So basically we have a reference to the player here, We've got the container, that's just the container being lockpicked. We've got a boolean to say whether the player is near to the object. We've got a boolean to say whether the player is holding the correct key, in this case it's Q. And we've got a float for the progress of the unlocking. Hit on awake, we just say, alright, if the player is null, then we find the player. And my container is just this. .get component container. So first off, we call near, so we check is player near. That just performs a distance check, so if we're within 2.5 units of the container, then we're near enough to lockpick it, so we can lockpick. So this starts off the next one, so input is input.get key keycode.q. And if input is true, so if we are holding down the Q key, then we add progress plus equals time.delta time, so that'll just increase it, and after 10 seconds, we can access the container. And I'll probably go back and improve the mechanics, so we could have, like, say, perks that increase the lockpicking speed or whatnot. And finally, when we're more than equal to 10, we set the can access container boolean in the my container script to true, and we set this.enable to false. And we have a GUI basically says if near is true, then what we do is we have a position, which is just a camera world to screen point of this game object's position. We get a rect, which is the pos.x, but the screen, the y coordinate is the screen.height minus pos.y. So that basically just stops it moving around. So this will basically just draw a tooltip at the position of the game object that the script is attached to. And if input is false, then it'll say press Q to lockpick, otherwise it'll just show you progress. And we've got a pretty much identical version for pickpocketing. They're not like child classes, because I didn't believe it'd be that necessary to do it. But if, you know, something changes, then I may well do it. Who knows? But for now, it doesn't really matter. So again, we got the static game object and, you know, blah, 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 all that stuff. Pretty much the same, except for this time we have a NPC reference. So we just get the NPC off the game object that it's attached to. And at this time, if the NPC can detect the player, and this boolean, new boolean NPC has detected player is false, then we add the action hunt player, because nobody likes getting their stuff robbed, so they'll try and attack the player if they can see him pickpocketing them. So we replace the current action, which I believe is new. Yeah, it is new. So we add the action A, which is just action hunt player. We then call myNPC.replace current action. Where's my NPC? Replace is down here. Basically, if current action is null, then we're basically just passing a new action. If the current action is null, then we don't do anything there. But if it isn't null, then we just destroy the current action, so that'll get rid of it off the game object and make sure we don't have a load of actions just piling up when we're not using them. And then we set the current action to be the new action. Do you have to initialize actions? Hold on. Perform action. No, we don't. That was in another script, another project. Sorry. And yeah, and then that will just set the NPC to attack the player if they're pickpocketing them. And we set NPC has detected player to true. So we're just saying once we've actually added that action, we don't need to keep adding it. So we just need to add it once. So that just makes sure it only gets done once when the player is first detected by the NPC. And that's pretty much it for it. You know, it's not a particularly feature heavy one. It's just a lot of little improvements that I hope will improve the project and give you an idea of how I design sort of code and scripts to work better together. You can tell I failed. Didn't fail English, got C, but whatever. So yeah, so we've got def and pickpocketing and lockpicking and all that stuff. Yeah. What else? I think we've only got a couple more topics to cover now. I'm trying to think of what they are, because I know I've got to do an item database, serialization. What else? I don't know. Sorry, I can't remember. I've written down somewhere, so that should be all right. But yeah, I know item databases and serialization will probably come under the same thing because we need to find a way. Oh, quests and perks. That is also something I want to do. So that'll probably come next actually, like perks and then quests because I'll need to find some way of like doing that. So yeah, so quests, perks, item database, serialization. And that'll probably be the end of the first phase of the tutorial, and then we'll go on to the improvements. So like developing tools to help the improve the actual development process, and then we can refine bits. I'd say we could add stats we could add a lockpicking minigame or something. I don't know. If you want to, I'm not too bothered. But yeah. What else? I don't know if there'll be a video next week because I will have. Well, there probably will be, but it might be late because I am releasing Loud or Quiet on Monday. So that was my first proper indie game release. I've been working on it since I think it's prototypes were done midway through 2015 on Newgrounds, and then all that stuff's up, and then it's sort of developed over time into a fully fledged indie game. It'll be out for £6.99, or if you're American, it'll be $9.99. So if you would, there's links in the description. If you buy that, or try the demo first. There's a free demo on Itch.io. The links will be in the description. Do that to support the channel. Would be really nice, and not having to go out and get a proper job. Would be really fun. What else? There's also other projects and shit you can check out on Itch.io, like the RTS, which people have been emailing me about. Two very nice people who have been playing around with the code, and they found bugs that were causing it to crash. Sort of like issues with pathfinding and AI. So if there is demand for that, I will make a video on that and give them due credit, of course. I'll probably do that even if there isn't demand, just for finishing it first. I've just got to find the time. So yeah, that was that. Go by Loud or Quiet on Monday the 20th. Cheers for watching, and goodbye.